Welcome to America's Policy Podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Alessio, and this is episode 18. Today, I wanted to discuss housing. And I've talked about this before, and I kind of want to talk about the process of buying a house and what kind of policy changes that I think are more beneficial to people. And now every state is different. Some states require a lawyer, some states require an optional lawyer, some states don't require a lawyer, you have just a real estate agent. And depending on your state, everything is different, right? And I think one state from another, it's a little difficult to kind of understand because sometimes it's very different when you're completing a transaction. But I'm going to just touch on New Jersey just because I'm more well versed in New Jersey compared to, say, California or New York or Florida. All these states are different, very different sometimes. And it's better to hear from somebody from there discussing real estate rather than me trying to explain it from a different state level. And I think what's important is for everyone heard about the lawsuit, the NAR lawsuit, and how it seems that sellers were given the burden of closing costs in the sense that they had to pay both the buyer's agent and the seller's agent a percentage of the sale. And that changed, and now the sellers have more power, I guess, in that industry rather than the buyers. Now, I think what's important is, especially during the home buying process, it's very complicated, especially in New Jersey. It's very complicated, especially in any state that has a lot of older homes. And over the years, I guess criteria changes, right? And so what something was normal 50 years ago or 75 years ago is not going to be normal now, or not going to be acceptable or safe now. And during the home buying process, typically how the process goes is that you submit an offer on a property and they either accept it, reject it, or counter it depending on the seller. And usually once they accept an offer, it goes into, after they sign the contract, you have a contract of sale, you have two people, you have the buyer and the seller, and then you have their representatives. So they have each have their agent if they're using one, and then their lawyers if they're using one. And it goes into attorney review process. Now, from a policy perspective, I don't agree with this process. And I think that we, as a society, especially because we have such a huge housing issue, and I've been talking to people too that have family or houses overseas in other countries, and they said that they're experiencing the exact same thing. So maybe this is not even universal to America. Maybe this is just a world issue that is affecting everyone. And after attorney review goes through the contract of sale, they go back and forth and settle on essentially a new agreement. And then that starts the process of going through inspections. Now, some people waive inspections, some people limited inspections, some people go an all cash offer. They don't care about inspections. Some people are doing conventional, some are doing FHA, and you'll know all this when you're submitting the offer. But you have to go through inspections. Now, if anyone knows, inspections can be quite pricey depending on what type of inspection or how many inspections. We have a variety of inspections in New Jersey. For example, we have mold, you have underground tanks, you have underground oil tanks, you have a traditional inspection. Then you have different levels that you're offering when you're putting an offer in for your contract. So you might limit your inspection just to structural or environmental, or maybe you're doing just plumbing and electricity, whatever the case may be. So a lot of times buyers now are going to have an even harder time to buy a property because, and then maybe and then during inspections, you might realize you need an engineer, and engineers are not cheap. So I think what we're also experiencing besides these housing crisis is this inaccessibility for people to get into home ownership. And you're probably seeing this in other states too, but it's becoming harder and harder for buyers. Now, I would probably argue, I think sellers should pay for an inspection, and I think that should become public record. But I know people disagree with that and say that the sellers already have a burden. But I do think when it comes to inspection, that should be the seller's responsibility, and say, this is what we're disclosing. This is what the house is. It is what it is. You're going to not make changes. We're not going to make changes or not make changes, but this should be just public record. I don't really agree with doing inspections, the buyer's paying for inspections. Now, I know the inspection industry is probably not going to be too happy about that, because that's is probably how they make a lot of their money when there's multiple buyers or a lot of people buying a house and walking away after inspection. But I do think from a policy perspective, I think that I guess timeline of being under attorney review, then inspections, and then you deal with inspection review, and then maybe you have to move forward to engineering or environmental, whatever other issues arise. And then mortgage, of course, that's also another hurdle. But I think from a policy perspective, it's becoming harder and harder now for home ownership. It's not as easy to obtain a home. And not only that, but when the inventory is low and a lot of people are not making enough money to afford a house, now they have to come up with a larger sum for not only the down payment, the real estate agent fee, closing costs. And this is why I think it's becoming even more difficult for buyers. Now, from a policy perspective, again, I still think that the seller should be responsible for disclosing. Even if I was selling 10 properties, I would rather not waste anyone's time and just disclose everything and saying, this is what it is, this is the dollar amount I'm asking for, meet me here or not, right? So I think it's a win-win for everyone. Maybe the inspectors might not have as many clients. I don't know the numbers there. I couldn't tell you. But what could we do from a federal perspective or a state perspective to help first-time homeowners or first-time home buyers, and maybe second home buyers, right? People that need to expand or buy a bigger house. Maybe they bought a 1-bed, 1-bath house and they need a second bedroom because they need an office or they had a child or whatever the case may be. And instead of incentivizing, because I think what New Jersey kind of did wrong was, not that you don't want to have opportunities for people to stay in their state and enjoy where they grew up, but we want people to retire. We want them to either downsize, or we want people to move to another state, not because we don't want people to be connected to their own home state, but because we need those houses, or we need development. There's overdevelopment in areas. Instead of building these sky-high buildings with 500 apartments, why don't we build on land that's just sitting there? Why don't we make it easier for people to build homes and developers, but to single-family homes or multifamily homes? In multifamily, I mean 4 units and under, 2 units and under, or a single-family house. I'm not talking about these apartment buildings where 100 units, the walls are paper thin. We don't want that. I'm sorry, we just don't. And that's for our state, and maybe for other states it works, right? So I don't know. I would ask the constituents what they would want. But for here, we have that huge problem. We don't have enough houses. I'd rather have, in my opinion, I think a lot of people that are in that almost middle age, I guess, category, I would rather have a smaller house as long as they have an access to a backyard, driveway, storage, rather than share walls and have an apartment building or a condo or a townhouse. Now, again, it works for some people. It works for some people. So what do we need to do to incentivize builders, or how do we make it easier? Maybe a lot of land, right? You see land sales. Now, land sales are very difficult here. And I think in other states too, because you need a larger lump sum of money down. Then you have to pay the companies to run the electrical lines, the gas lines, etc. Maybe we can incentivize people to build a home, right? We have a lot of land in some areas. Why don't we incentivize? Maybe we can give a better option, because the mortgage industry, it's actually harder to get a land loan than it is than a first time home buyer or a first time mortgage for a property that's already there, because you require more money down for a land. And I don't remember the percentages offhand, but maybe from a policy perspective, we in our state could say, hey, listen, if you buy land, we can give you a low interest loan to start the development, or maybe we could supplement it with the mortgage company. I don't know. We have to look into it and understand more. But there is an opportunity there. And I'm sure in other states too. Maybe there's other states that have a lot more farmland. Hey, maybe if you build one property on your house, like on your farmland, we'll incentivize you to do this. So maybe that other house can be a family member's house or friends, and then you could deed that area or deed that land to someone else, and it builds housing that way. There's opportunities. It's just how to convince legislators to get on board. And housing is definitely one of those issues that is in dire need right now. And you see this all the time. You see this in the headlines, people struggling to buy houses. You have the mortgage rates, of course. Is that something that's going to be handled right away? Probably not, right? And we can only do so much when it comes to, we can't really move items so quickly on a federal level. Maybe on a state level, we could be a little bit more faster. But these are the barriers we have. We have the mortgage industry. They make it very difficult too. Understandably, you don't want anyone defaulting on a mortgage. Then you have development, your state policies. We have all these items that are barriers for home ownership. So what do we need to do? And I think that's really important to address these issues, because then at least it gives us opportunity, and we could fix not only the economy, but it's the housing shortage too. So please reach out to me. If you are a developer buying a house, selling a house, what issues arise during the home buying process? Did you buy land and build on it? Please let me know your story. americaspolicypodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to me, and maybe I can get a couple of people on the podcast to just discuss what issues they ran into, and maybe we can figure out some solutions. If not, see you next week.